Ladies and gentlemen, it's time once again for another season of Chewing the Gristle with yours truly, Greg Koch. Can you believe it's already season 6? We've got so many cool interviews lined up. Are we going to talk about music? You betcha. But what else are we going to talk about? Well, quite frankly, anything that comes to mind. So stay tuned, doggone it. Let's chew that doggone gristle. Season 6. Come. Ladies and gentlemen, this week on Chewing the Gristle, we have the legendary Dweezil Zappa, guitar player extraordinaire, torchbearer for his dad's glorious legacy. Of course, that would be Frank Zappa, and just all-around cool cat, my buddy Dweezil Zappa, this week on Chewing the Gristle. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome once again to another installment of Chewing the Gristle with yours truly, Gregory Cockery. I'm here today with the majestic Dweezil Zappa, a man who needs no introduction, but someone I've been very fortunate to know for a few years here. We've actually played a little bit together. I'm a huge fan of course, his playing, his father's legacy, and playing the whole 9 yards. And just a pleasure to be able to just shoot the breeze today, or chew the gristle, if you will. How's it going?
Very good. Thanks for having me. And of course, many people may or may not know the Gregory Cockery is very close to Gregory Peccary.
Yes.
Which is one of my dad's songs. One of the
and that's no accident.
Yes, I figured as much, but perhaps other people have no idea where that comes from. So it might be good to give them some insight into the rest.
Yes, indeed. So you sent me a video the other day of you playing for the 4th of July, unleashing the powers of Ed Van Halen and Slim Jim Hendrix in one fell swoop for some revelers of the Independence Day activities.
Yes, and it was done on a guitar with no locking tremolo, so a very bold move.
Indeed, my friend. Well, it sounded spot on. You got that Halen thing down.
Well, you know, it's the nuances and the details that I like to try to recreate as best as I can. And I know that that's a thing that is very much in your playing style as well, for the people that are your influences, you know, getting the vibrato stylings of Eric Clapton or other players and incorporating it on the deepest level of your own playing. So when I was doing that as just a fun thing for the neighborhood shindig, I wanted to play it as well as I could. And it's always interesting to see if you can actually, in a live situation, play something as close as possible to the original. So in the case of Eruption, that might have been the best time I ever played it.
Yeah, it was spot on. It was spot on. And the tone was glorious.
Yeah, it was from my Fractal. I spent a lot of time making a sound that would recreate the album as best as I could. And I tried a lot of different ways to go about getting the sound as close as I could. These days, the tools that we have in terms of being able to make sounds and utilize them in various different live playing situations are better than they have ever been. So, you know, of course I love actual tube amplifiers and whatnot, but I didn't have the manpower to drag out a bunch of gear. We were setting up for this little shindig in the middle of the street in our neighborhood, and I figured it was going to be easier for me to just use my Fractal FM9 and a couple QSC wedges than to try to wrangle some major Marshall amplifiers and other effects and things to try to get into that ballpark. And I wanted it to be a decent recording and not be too crazy loud because there was kids in the strollers and all that. So I was happy with how it turned out. But, you know, at the end of the day, when people want to freak out on, oh, you can never get a modeler to sound like a real amp, I think you can. And I think you can actually be happy with the results, especially when you hear the finished recording.
Yeah, I think it comes down. It always comes down to who's perpetrating the music activities at that particular juncture in time.
Yes, that definitely has something to do with it. But for the people that want to get into the cork sniffing things and talk about how terrible it is that people are moving to modelers versus amplifiers, everybody loves the sound of an amp, but it's not always practical these days in some environments to be able to use very loud amps, etc.
This is true.
But we wouldn't have modelers if people didn't love the sound of amplifiers. So it's not that people are so obsessed with trying to replace it with digital stuff. It's that if you really love that sound and you need an alternative, this is a good practical application.
Absolutely. I was interested, I know you've probably answered this many times, but, I remember back in the day, you were always, initially inspired by old Ed Van Halen. And I remember when you played on that Don Johnson record years ago. And I'm just wondering, with your dad being Frank, and who I'm a big fan of his guitar stylings. I mean, he did very cool things. I know he was not one that perhaps I always remember hearing that he would never practice until he went on the road and would just kind of get his chops together as he went. But he always played amazing stuff to me, and especially all the, as we were talking about earlier, all the weird little nuanced blues stuff that he had gleaned over the years and whatever. And his tones were always killer and so on and so forth. But a lot of times when a dad is the guitar player or really good at a particular thing, the son kind of goes, yeah, I'm going to go over here. So how much was that a place when you started playing guitar? They're like, I'm going to do something different from the old man, or did you see it as consistent, or was it an act of rebellion? What was your?
I think the thing is, I've always been a fan of my dad's music, but I always knew that it was way more difficult than any other music. So
right,
even when I heard it and was inspired by it, I thought to myself, one day I will get to that. But right now is not the time because I don't know enough. Right. I don't know enough to be able to do it, So the stuff that was easier for me to wrap my ear around was Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, which is not to say that their playing is easy to emulate or learn at all. It's just that it's so guitar-centric that I could focus my attention on that and tune everything else out and only hear the guitar. And it was easier to do that with that music than it was with my dad's music, because it was far more harmonically complex and sophisticated. And it was harder to be able to learn any of the stuff that my dad was doing, just because he was a composer who used the guitar as his main instrument, but it started as a drummer. So rhythmically, the stuff that he did was very advanced and it was complicated as hell. So to some people, it sounds like random things are happening, but he's very, very precise with the rhythms, and the things that are happening are very hard to duplicate. So like I said, it was much harder for me to go from the beginning and say, hey, I'm going to do this, because who would? It's just hard. And when I did really dive into it, even at that point, so that was 2004, I started really learning the music in depth, and then we started touring it in 2006. But I toured it up until the whole crazy world shut down in 2020 on an annual basis. And it was really that whole 14-year period that I got to the point where I could feel like I started to understand where he was coming from as a guitar player and learn the vocabulary and the nuances that were important to be able to then play in a way that evoked his style, but still allowed me to play as myself in that moment at the speed of thought. And that's the real tricky thing, is if you're trying to play in context to the music of my dad, for example, it won't sound like my dad at all if you don't have the knowledge of his vocabulary. It'll start to sound like some lame fusion experiment where, you know, you're opening at Magic Mountain for a puppet show.
Right.
And that kind of thing just doesn't appeal to me. So it did take a long time to hone the skills to create enough knowledge of his vocabulary so that I could actually use it in real time.
Got it. So when you were coming up with stuff, would he sit down with you and say, hey, check this out? Or was it you just kind of were on your own, or you ask him little questions about this? Or
in the early days of me playing, you know, he has such an idiosyncratic style of playing and technique. So he didn't think that what he had to offer was a good place for me to start. He thought, well, you know, he himself thought, I play so much in a style that's my own. This might not be the way that you should try to learn how to play the guitar. You might need some more fundamental basics. And at the time, Steve Vai was in my dad's band. So he was about 21 years old. I was 12 when I started playing. And Steve wrote down a few lessons in a notebook that basically had some chord diagrams, and he mapped out the pentatonic scale in the key of A. And so essentially I took that and ran with it. I just sat and listened to records and tried to figure out stuff on the guitar. And over the years, I really never learned to read music well. Other people in my band can read very well, but I have to learn everything by ear. So all the complicated stuff that I ever learned to play, I learn it by ear and just try to have that get internalized somehow.
You know, I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit to, because it reminded me as you were saying that, you know, the arrangements of Frank's stuff, I mean, it's insane. There's a lot of memorizing of very complicated parts, and there isn't, you know, there's some room to, you know, extemporize a little bit with, you know, the attitude or whatever of a specific part. But how did you get in the mindset and the discipline to memorize those parts so that they were performance ready and maintain them in such a way?
It is a challenge. It remains a challenge, but the best way to think about it is that if an orchestra is going to play the music of Bach or Beethoven or whoever the contemporary composer might be, the notes are on the page with specific rhythms and guidelines as to how the stuff is meant to be played. There are instructions from the composer, and my dad's music was all written in that same way. So when you're in a band that's playing this stuff, if you're going to do it correctly, you have to have an orchestral mindset, meaning everybody has parts to play and they're part of a team, and the team brings the whole piece to light. And if you're going to play it under the instruction of the composer, you want to adhere to those things, and you have to be familiar enough with the colors and textures that are used when the stuff is performed. And so we always reference it to recordings. We double check notes because, you know, sometimes on the page it might be different than what you hear in a recording. Something might have been changed on tour because my dad preferred it a different way at that point. So we're always doing the due diligence, and it's a very, very difficult task to maintain any of that stuff. Even when we're learning stuff for a tour where, let's say, we're going to play 60 shows in a year's worth of touring, you know, we might learn 35 or 40 songs, and some, you know, come in and out during that period. But as much as I try to learn the stuff in advance, I just never have enough time for this stuff to really be fully internalized to where I feel like I go out on stage and I know it very, very well. It's always a tightrope act where at any moment something could go seriously wrong, and then I would have to bail on a part. And so that's the reason why when it's arranged for the band, the most difficult melodic parts are usually split between 2 to 3 instruments, so that if anyone bails, the part still continues.
Right. Got you.
So, and that's the same way it would be in an orchestra. You have the different colors and timbres of the orchestra bringing the texture of that melody there, but you cannot rely on the melody being from a single source with the difficulty in the music. So a lot of people have to do double duty. So sometimes you'll see Sheila Gonzalez, who plays saxophone and keys, playing saxophone and keys at the same time. Right. Two different instruments at the same time. And, there's just a lot that goes on in all of this. But at the end of the day, it's one of the greatest challenges you could ever have as a musician, to learn this music and try to play it so that it is commensurate with the way that my dad had his bands play it. Right. That is a great accomplishment. And at the end of the day, what I always say is that the music has to speak for itself. I don't need to tell anybody, hey, my band is really good. Right. Just listen to what is being done and then think to yourself, could I do that? And the answer is most likely no.
I was going to ask you about, like those parts and bailing on a part. And it reminded me of something I was describing to someone about. I was asking somebody about this same type of thing in regard to, you can learn something and you will have it like muscle memory, in a state of preparedness, like muscle memory mode. Yeah.
Right.
And that kind of leads it to what we just discussed, where you might get to the point where you just have a brain fart and it's gone. And then there's that deeper level of really having internalized it, that at any point you could start at any point during that head and know exactly where you're going. So with 35 tunes, I would imagine it's hard to, and of course, other tunes in the whole arsenal, depending on the year from year to year, but to have that level of preparedness for each one of the songs, there's got to be, it's a sliding scale.
There's no way. And over a period of time, even if I've played certain songs many times over the years, they don't stick. I will, at the beginning of every rehearsal period, I have to relearn most of the things. Now, it does come back faster if I've played them many times over the past 15 or 16 years. But I still have to relearn pretty much anything that I have ever played. I have to spend time to relearn before we're in rehearsals. And then by the time we're at the end of the rehearsal process, I'm hoping to have enough muscle memory that I can get through the show where I'm cued by the muscle memory, because a lot of the melodies might be sort of obtuse, and if you can't sing it, I'm not a guy that can sing and play what I'm playing while I'm playing it.
Right.
But some people have that ability, and it helps them lock things in because they can kind of sing it and play along to whatever they're hearing in their head. But, many of the melodies that we end up playing are, you take the Black Page, it's very hard. You can't, the way that the intervallic structure of these compositions is put together, it's very, very difficult. You would never be able to accurately sing this stuff rhythmically or intervallically. So it does have to come to muscle memory and a good understanding of what the rhythmic components are. And even when it comes to that, I wouldn't be able to, if somebody said, hey, explain to me how to play this nested tuplet part in the Black Page, I wouldn't be able to explain it in a rhythmic discussion. I would just have to play it and go, this is how it goes. Right. I have to just follow along with the band when it's playing it, but yet they can all tell you, oh, well, yes, it's this, and this is a quarter note, and you have to think about it like this, and then there's a metric modulation. All that stuff makes no sense to me. I just have to hear it and play it back as if it's, me learning the Heartbreaker riff. It's like, right. It's all just a different riff to learn and memorize.
This is kind of a bizarre question, but do you think that Frank ever just came up with something like, let's see if these fuckers can play this, as opposed to,
Sure.
right. That's fine.
Yeah, sure. So like the Black Page is a good example. That was a drum solo, a written drum solo that he gave to Terry Bozzio when Terry was in the band. And now Terry was also maybe 22 when he joined the band. Now think about what it takes to be the person that drives the bus in my dad's band, and you're 22 years old and you're the drummer. And, it's really hard to imagine kids today wanting to be good enough to be able to do that stuff. Like
Right.
the ethic now is dog shit compared to back in the middle 70s or late 70s or when people were like, yeah, I want to be the best I can possibly be.
Right.
So yes, the challenge was put forth on the page. And then when Terry could do it, then my dad was like, okay, great. Well, on to the next thing. And so probably one of the hardest pieces of music he ever wrote, which has only been played a handful of times by different versions of his band, is a piece of music called Mo and Herb's Vacation. And Vinnie Colaiuta was able to sight read the most difficult parts in that and play them. So we're talking about this is like alien ability to do that kind of stuff. This is not normal for someone to be able to do that.
Right.
So,
and then you put on top of that it seemed that in that era, it just seems extraordinarily difficult to be able to find someone with that kind of sight reading and that kind of musical technical skill, but also have the grease thing that's understood. You know what I mean? It just seems that is extraordinarily unlikely combination.
That's the thing that I think makes my dad's music stand out, is that it's not, for some people, the uninitiated who don't really know what they're listening for, it might sound like technical exercises to them. If for them, improvisational music is the Grateful Dead or Fish,
right?
That's like level one,
Right.
So the thing is, what you're talking about, the nuance and detail that's required to be able to play the hard stuff, but still give it that cool groove, and the syncopated stuff is all working. The whole band is able to just lock into what that stuff is and have that innate thing propelling the music forward. The authenticity of all the different styles that you need to be able to back up if you're in my dad's band. You have to be able to play everything from crazy jazz to gospel to blues to rock to funk. Everything has to be done in a way that is authentic and real to the style.
Right.
There's no just like, oh, I'm faking it here. Everybody has to be well-rounded and can convince you that whatever style that they're playing, they're well-versed in it. And that's how my dad wrote his music. It has so many different flavors and styles at all times. So that's why it's so difficult. The keyboard players did a ton of work to make sure that all of the harmony and the groove and the feel for a lot of, especially the bluesy, gospely stuff, players like George Duke,
right.
Amazing stuff, but you put the wrong person in that environment and they have the wrong set of influences, it's not going to sound good.
Exactly.
So a good example of that too would be, there's an interview that George Duke did where early in his time playing with my dad was having him play some doo-wop chord progressions. And George was adding extensions to the chords. And my dad was like, no, I just want triads. And George was like, yeah, but, I'm a jazz guy, there's more that can be done here. And my dad said, the music requires triads here, just these triads. And George was, continuing to argue a little bit, and he was like, well, I don't know if this is for me. And my dad said, what, is this beneath you? then he really had to think about it. And he was like, I need to play what serves the music in this. And then he actually kind of really got into the idea of playing in the appropriate way for the music that was being played at that moment. It didn't need all this other stuff.
Right.
Now, is there a time when it does? Yes, absolutely. But you have to have the discipline to be part of the team and do the thing that makes it sound the way it's supposed to sound for what's happening in that moment.
Well, I think that touches on something that I've been, contemplating as I see. I mean, obviously, arguably, we are in the time, especially on guitar, but all other instruments as well, with the advent of all the social medias, where people can put on these amazing displays of technical virtuosity for 60 seconds. And you watch these things and you're like, egads, and the bar just keeps getting raised and so on and so forth. But it seems like all that little nuanced stuff of why a simpler thing like a triad would work over a more extended voicing, or a simple phrasing with nice vibrato and tone, is something that escapes someone who can do the most technically adept thing. I just think that, to your point, that Frank's music and Frank's whole approach, as much as it was extraordinarily difficult, it was not snobby. I think there's a technical snobcraft that looks over all of that minutia stuff that makes the stuff memorable, for lack of a better term, but soulful, to be a little bit more to the point.
Well, at the end of the day, people want to connect with music and it makes them feel something. And so I feel like what you're talking about and the challenge as a musician that wants to be good at their instrument in a technical way, there's a lot of time spent practicing the technical things and then applying that to music.
Yes.
So I think it may, in some cases, take a technically proficient musician many more years to realize how to bring the feeling and the connection to the music to the listener, because they spent so much time trying to be technically proficient to the next level where it's a mind-boggling technical precision. But at the same time, if you're the listener, you only can tolerate so much of that. You don't want to just see technical perfection over and over and a billion notes. It becomes the struggle for the technically proficient or technical minded musician to be able to figure out how to write music that allows for the technical aspect to be present, but have enough of the other stuff that makes repeat listening enjoyable.
Right.
So that, I think, is the bigger part of it, which is the bigger struggle. I myself still have a difficulty with that kind of balance, because I like to learn new things and I like to try to employ them as regularly as I can, because I think the only way that you can propel yourself forward when learning new things is to actually use it in the battle.
Sure, absolutely.
But sometimes, let's say if it's my own playing, if I'm going to be critical about my own playing, if I'm trying to do too many things at once because I'm thinking, oh, this will be fun, let me try this or this other thing, it comes off as the sound of a run-on sentence.
Right. And
so that's a hard thing to self-edit in the moment when you're improvising. Right. And improvising a complicated piece of music is way more of a different thing than just performing something that you have rehearsed very well. That's just this acrobatic feat, Right. So there's a big difference between the players that can play something very technical and they've rehearsed it and they can just do it because it's been rehearsed so much, versus somebody that can go up and play like what Alan Holdsworth could do, or some other players that have a different vocabulary, but still a huge ability to improvise. A guy like Oz Noy or a guy like Julian Lage, these guys can improvise in ways where they could play. You give them 3 10-minute solos in a row, they will play almost zero of the same ideas because they have such a large vocabulary, and they can build and structure their compositional ideas based on reacting to the music that's happening in the moment.
Right. Well, I was kind of thinking as you were talking about that, is that, a couple different things. First of all, like when there's like different idioms now where the people that are playing this technical stuff online and people are enjoying it. And I'm definitely not being like, oh, kids these days type of a thing, because it is what it is. And if people are getting enjoyment out of it and people are enjoying doing it and they're making a living out of it, fantastic. But that ability to connect at a visceral level in a live performance, as you were illuminating, is not always predicated on gymnastics from beginning to end, whereas online it seems like you're much more shall we say inclined to get massive followership and be able to propel your career on that online situation in a way where it maybe never dictates that you actually perform live. And as we've seen with some of these online personalities, that when they get found out that they are doctoring their performances or so on and so forth, and that they can't actually play it live, which again is, if people are enjoying what they're doing, there's, the argument could be made, who gives a shit one way or the other. But when you have this other situation of what we grew up on is this live situation and connecting with the crowd. And also on top of that, what you're talking about is like when you're learning new stuff, I always refer to it as the gestational period of a lick. It's like you were going to you learn like a new word. Now I always use the word like recalcitrant. You learn recalcitrant and you're going to try to throw it in a sentence. Well, if you throw it in, it doesn't make any sense. It's just kind of people, what are you talking about? But by the same token, you've got to, at some point, as things are in a gestational period, go, I'm going to try that thing now. And the goal is to get past the point of, I think I'm going to try that thing now. I think it's going to work, versus it's just subliminal and you just do it. But that only happens really from playing out live a lot and having the freedom to improvise.
That is true. But also there has to be something that clicks in your brain that gives you enough knowledge of why the thing that you're trying to do will work at the time you're trying to do it. So yes. Knowing that you're trying to target a particular chord tone and then you want to lead to something, or knowing that you have a rhythmic element that you want to incorporate, these things in advance of you doing it help you actually use the idea versus just saying, I'm going to throw this lick in here.
Right.
It's better to know what the fundamental idea is and how to use it in a way where you can react to the music and throw it in that way than
right.
it is to say, well, I've learned this lick, I'm just going to play this lick as a thing, because you might not be playing over something that has the right feel or the same
right. True.
You're practicing that lick for.
Absolutely.
It's going to have to adjust somehow.
Right.
And so that's where the challenge of learning a new thing and implementing it comes in, where if you understand why you like the sound of something and you think, okay, what I'm doing is I'm blending 2 triads here and I've got a pattern where it's these 2 triads fit within 12 notes. If you know that you can adjust to the rhythm of what you're playing, but still use that same idea, it's easier to filter that into your playing than it is, like I said, to just say, oh, I'm just going to throw this lick in here somewhere.
Right.
Sometimes you can get away with that, but I don't think it's as effective as actually using it because you know why you're using it.
Right. Yeah, I get you. Absolutely. We interrupt this regularly scheduled gristle-infested conversation to give a special shout out to our friends at Fishman Transducers, makers of the Greg Koch signature Fluence Gristle Tone pickup set. Can you dig that? And our friends at Wildwood Guitars of Louisville, Colorado, bringing the heat in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. So at what point in your development as a guitar player did you make the leap from being maybe more of a rock-oriented individual to trying to tackle some of these more exotic chord structures and so on and so forth? And I mean, do you remember, like, I got the Slaminski book at this point, or I studied this thing and I started adding this kind of different scalar ideas here, or this particular harmonic approach? How did that kind of develop? And was there a time where it kind of really took off versus a time where you were just more of kind of a rock dude?
Well, I've always been interested in different music because I grew up listening to my dad's music, but also what my dad listened to at home, which was oftentimes folk music from different countries. So Bulgarian women's choir or Indian ragas or Arabic music, or so microtonal things and things that have weird rhythms and different textures. All that stuff has always been appealing, but the thing that I never really had that much of an interest in was bebop. I mean, I can appreciate what it takes to do that,
Right.
but I don't love that sound so much. It's the idea to be able to have the phrasing ability of a player that could easily play through changes in a bebop way, but not necessarily choose those notes, is kind of like the idea of something that would be appealing to me.
Right.
I never got great at playing over chord changes. That's something I would like to be able to do better and be able to recognize easier. There's some people, and I bet you're one of them, that could be hear somebody playing, whether it's a blues or any kind of, perhaps standard or a pop kind of song, and you're going to be able to recognize, oh, that's kind of a 1-4-5 or a 2-5-1 or whatever kind of thing is happening, and you can adjust to that in real time. I can't do that because I learn things more as the song goes like this, and I only remember the song based on the arrangement of that particular song. So I'm not able to instantly filter what I'm hearing and say, oh, that's the 4 chord or that's the 5. I don't think that way at this point in time. I wish I did, because it would be better. It would be easier for me to play more different ideas. Most of the time when I'm playing something in an improvisational way, I'm hearing it at the same time the listener is hearing it, versus there are some players that know what they want to do as they're doing it, or in advance of doing the thing. They can already see what they're going to do at the finish line. They've got it all mapped out in a way where they can turn the corners of every chord progression and basically tell a whole story. Versus me, I'm thrown into it, like I said, it's like a tightrope act where I'm hearing it as everybody else is hearing it. So it's either good or bad, and then I'm moving on, So, but the point is, you asked, like, when did I kind of figure out how to start incorporating some of these things that maybe go outside the norm of
Right.
the rock world. So the first thing that really gave me the idea that you could play notes that maybe aren't the right notes, but they still sound good, is the stuff that Edward would do when he was trying to emulate Alan Holdsworth.
Right. Yeah.
So I started to see these 3-note per string patterns that he was using, and I started to adapt my own versions of that kind of stuff. And I'm much more of a pattern player than a knowledgeable player of scales, although I do have a decent understanding of intervals within scales, and say, oh, I do want to emphasize the major or the minor third here, or the flat 5, or whatever the case may be in some of those kind of situations. And that's been only because of playing live on the road for 15 years in a row and playing with a rhythm section that I'm comfortable with, where I can play a lot better with my own band than I could sitting in with somebody else. I'm just not comfortable with the different rhythm sections. And oddly enough, I think you can hear that even in Edward Van Halen's playing. He sounds way more like Edward Van Halen when he's playing with Alex Van Halen than he's playing with anybody else.
Right.
Yep,
absolutely. Crazy activity. So when you were in high school, did you have high school bands that you were playing with, and what kind of stuff were you doing?
No, I started playing when I was 12. The first thing I ever recorded was 9 months or so after I was playing. I did My Mother's a Space Cadet with the Flipside Crunchy Water, which was produced,
Delicious.
yeah, which was produced by Edward Van Halen and Don Landy. But then I made my first album at 15 years old, and then the second album at 17, and the third album at 19. So on and on, a couple of years in between records. But I wasn't doing a lot of live shows up through all that time. The majority of the live performance stuff that I've done has been playing my dad's music starting back in 2006. Prior to that, I had done a few tours of my own music for the Confessions album and the Shampoo Horn record.
I actually opened up for you in Milwaukee at Shank Hall on the Shampoo Horn tour, and I still have that T-shirt someplace.
Yeah, and I just remember that we did that medley. My band was playing that 200 song 70s medley.
Exactly. Yeah.
We kept changing the lyrics to every song to be about Shank Hall.
Exactly correct.
Yeah. But the thing about the live experience, I would say only in the last maybe 4 or 5 years have I started to develop what I would perceive as my own style of guitar playing. You know, some people might say that they heard a style coming from me sooner than that. But, you know, if you listen to any of my records, they don't sound alike from record to record. The song style, the guitar playing style changes, the tones change pretty drastically. There's no, it's not like AC/DC where you know what you're going to get.
Right.
Because it's, you know, it is that thing. It's very, very different from record to record. But I think I'm at the point now where I have developed a keen interest in certain things on the guitar, and I'm trying to propel those things forward when we do live performances. And now with some of the stuff I'm doing with YouTube and whatnot. But I'm at a point now where I feel like it would be fun to do collaborations with people and make stuff that is just different than any of the stuff I've done before, and kind of bringing it back to what we were saying earlier, where if you can do it in a way that's simple, but then still has the personality and the nuance and the detail of the thing that you're trying to get across out of simple stuff, like just phrasing, vibrato.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a great challenge at this point, is like make some music that does have some still cool ideas as far as arranging and tone and song structure, but not have it just have to be super complicated.
Sure.
So if you and me, if we were to do a record of our two styles blending, I think it would be a very interesting sound, because it would be twisted guitar.
Yes, I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah, we should. We should just make something that is based on all the things that we were just talking about. Have the ability to play freely in where our skill set is at this time, but not have to be predicated on complexity. Exactly. Like what we sound like when something's more simple.
Right.
Know?
Well, that's one of the things we've kind of veered towards with my trio. You know, earlier on, my tunes, especially instrumentally, I always felt they had to have a certain level of complexity to be different.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I started to realize, what's fun is just writing songs where you can either play over the changes or not. You can just kind of, play phrasing and pentatonic-y stuff, or you can actually play over those different changes and it'll sound cool. But the point is that I've especially since we've been touring so much, is you can totally tell what songs resonate with the crowd. There's some songs that I think have the most heart-wrenching chord changes and so on and so forth, but I'm hearing them with my ears, right? Because we've been playing for so long. You get moved by certain sequences of chords that you hear in a different way than the average jamoke, who might listen to it and say, yeah, that's just too complicated. Whereas all of a sudden you play like a 2-3 chord song with a certain kind of groove and they lose their shit. So
Yeah. It is like, again, AC/DC as an example. They are so good at doing what they do, and it's not easy to actually play.
no, absolutely not.
The way that they play them. I mean, they are masters at that stuff. And the thing is, when it works, the power of that simple thing, there really isn't anything better in terms of the power of rock. You get sucked into it, and the energy is there, and the whole thing just moving as a giant unit is really cool. And I think, when you have the complicated stuff, the more sophisticated things, you can have people really enjoy that too, but it's a more limited audience.
Right.
And I feel like, as an experiment, it would be interesting to be able to just try playing in a way that is outside of what I have been doing maybe for the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And see what that's like. Because I haven't really had a chance to make anything brand new for a long time. But I feel like it would be fun to do some stuff with some different folks. And now is just as good of a time in terms of being an independent artist and just making stuff and saying, hey, look, going to do this thing. Here's how you find it. And, telling them to go to the website or whatever. I'm not ever going to be on a label. There's no label that would want anything that I do. So it's it wouldn't be even necessary because you have all the tools. Everybody does now in terms of being able to get your stuff distributed and out there in front of people.
Right.
But the whole point of trying to do something different as you keep progressing is when you get to that point where you feel like the thing that you're motivated to do is do something that actually hits the right way and makes somebody feel something, that's a very different way of playing and writing than just being like, oh, I have this technical skill and I can do these complicated things and that sounds cool and it's fun. But it is different than when you play a song like what you were saying, where you see people react to it a certain way. And, if you can find a few things that are new that you write and you can get that reaction,
right,
that's an interesting challenge.
It is, absolutely. Well, what's been interesting is that I know you're going to do some of the Almond family things in the fall, right? And those tunes and that approach is, I was always a big Almond Brothers fan, but and what's so crazy about those harmonies is that, those tunes, you got to know the parts, but at the same time, there's a lot of room for interpretation. It's a lot of feel, and of course, improvising. They're mostly over 1 or 2 chords, but, as we've been stating, you can get a lot done in that environment. Your dad used to like to solo over 1 or 2 chords almost all the time.
And the thing about that is his band was good enough to be able to hear where he would go with that.
Right.
And then adjust to the modal things that he might allude to. And then whatever happened, they could back him up. It could start as, something that's simple, but it could go completely in another direction.
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of seeing a live performance. And my dad really loved being able to do something that audience that night was going to see that no other audience was going to see.
Right. And that's the way it should be.
Unique every time it's really cool if you think about it. And also the way that he would create arrangements so that specifically could happen. It was by design.
Right.
So a song like Inca Roads, where the structure of the song has difficult things that come in and out, which is the the foundational elements, the themes in it. But then there's a wide open guitar solo and a wide open keyboard solo, and they can go anywhere.
Right.
But you could have that song get performed 1,000 times and it will never have the same solo section. It won't have the same attitude. And that's what's cool, is that you could create a song that could be different every time it's played.
Exactly. And that's the way it should be.
And even crazier is that he wrote one specific song that's called Approximate, where every time it's played, it will sound different because the name of it is really the instruction. There's certain rhythms that have to be played, but the notes are the choice of the instrumentalists who are playing it. So there's things that will happen. You have to basically follow if you just saw a shape of the notes on paper, they're not specific notes, but there is a specific contour to it. So that's what's funny, is that if you listen to the song Approximate, the notes are different every single time it's played, but it's still going to be recognizable as the song because of the contoured rhythm of it. So that, I love that my dad was always experimenting with those kinds of things in a compositional realm.
Now, did he do, I can't remember if we talked about this in the past or not, but would he do stuff like, it seems like a lot of times when you're listening to, especially like in the, the early to mid 70s incarnations of his ensembles and records, is that he would have a composition that maybe was recorded in the studio, but then he'd fly in like the live solo. Would he do stuff like that? Like have all this? Yeah.
Yeah. So he had a technique, and this was before DAWs, before digital audio workstations. He was a master with the razor blade edit on tape. So there are solos that are on records where you hear it and you go, wow, this is an amazing solo. And the interplay between the guitar and the drums is so cool. Yet it's not what you think, because like, let's say a song on Shake Your Booty, Yo Mama, that guitar solo, right, that's from a different performance than the rhythm track. So that is a solo that was placed on top of that rhythm track, completely unrelated to that. Yet it sounds like it was improvised and played with that track. So he called that xenochrony. It was basically the idea of taking two different things and putting them on a similar timeline so that the time could be synchronized. So it's basically two different synchronizations of what could be, in some cases, like he might take a solo from a relative key,
right,
and put it on a song that had a different structure, different feel, and he would just say, "What does this sound like?" And if he liked it, that became the solo on that record. So he did stuff like that all the time. He was constantly recording the shows. He pretty much recorded every show.
Everything, right?
Wow. Yeah, which is really crazy. Yeah.
So it's just, to me, it's amazing to me, as someone who was never, I was never really interested in getting under the hood of the recording process. I just, let's go to that studio. That guy's good. I know what I want in the studio in terms of, hey, let's do that there. Let's do this. That sounds like this or whatever. But to have the minutia level of being able to manipulate all the gear, know how to get all the different sounds, not to mention to be able to compose all this stuff, and be able to understand all the different limitations of the different instruments, get it up to, the guy must never have slept.
Definitely worked the back of the clock. He liked to work all throughout the late night hours and then sleep in the daytime. So that wasn't great when we were trying to play in the backyard, because you couldn't,
Right.
But yeah, generally he a 17-hour workday was nothing for him.
Insane. But the results speak for themselves. I remember, I think it was pre-COVID when I saw you up in Minneapolis and I sat in and you guys played Sleep Dirt.
Yep.
And I remember I was like, what is this song? And I thought, I got 10 Zappa records, I'm a fan. And then you realize that ain't shit. And then I did the big deep dive after that, and of course, I started with the Sleep There, and I got a bunch of different records and so on and so forth. But man, it's amazing the amount of music that was made, and it's impossible to kind of get your mind around the whole thing. But it was his mind, and he really wasn't under the mindset of caring about the legacy. He just wanted to create in the moment, do the thing, and be in the moment, and go on to the next thing, and not worry about it. I mean, I'm sure he wanted to make sure that all the, the I's were crossed, and or whatever that expression is, T's were crossed and I's were dotted, but just wanted to keep going full speed ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he just he had one phrase which was "keep going, never stop."
Right.
But the thing is, somebody towards the end of his life asked him, "How would you like to be remembered?" And he said, "I wouldn't."
Right. I remember seeing that interview.
The thing is, like, he had a self-deprecating sense of humor, but he also had a disdain for somebody that did want a legacy. He's like, why are you focused on what your legacy is? You know? So I feel like there's a good lesson in that, in terms of like, don't take yourself too seriously. Do what you like. If other people like it too, great. But, everybody is going to have their own experience in life. And, if you're trying to do too much to influence somebody to behave a certain way, that's not your business, you know? And so he just really didn't like situations where people would, try too hard to make what they thought be what they wanted him to think as well. He was a very independent thinker,
right,
and stood up for all the things that essentially are the most important personal freedoms. And it's in his music. He did it as a person. And I just think that when it comes to music and what he was able to accomplish, people barely know the half of it. He made over 65 albums in his lifetime, and I don't know how many have come out since, maybe another 40.
Right.
And there's still tons of music, from live performances with things that people haven't heard. But the difference is, when he was curating all of it, he knew what he wanted people to hear versus let's just pull anything out of the vault and put it out. There's definitely things that have come out that he never would have put out.
Right.
They have nothing to do with the stuff that comes out, but I know for a fact that there's certain performances that have come out where his guitar is out of tune a lot. He wouldn't have put that stuff out.
Sure. Well, it's the same. It's the same thing with the Hendrix thing. Like you could tell he would just from the stuff that was put out in his lifetime versus what came out. But then there's always the thing of, as fans, you're curious because you want to hear it. But the danger is that, just like with everything nowadays, is that people will hear that one thing and go, well, he wasn't that great. Listen to his guitar. It's out of tune.
Yeah, exactly. But, the thing is, you used to be able to, as an artist, curate what you wanted people to hear.
Right.
And I think that's still an important factor. These days, everybody bootlegs whatever your performance is, puts it up on Instagram or on YouTube immediately. So you can't curate what you do.
No, absolutely not.
Have a bad night, it's going to be out there forever, And
then people will, see that one thing and judge your entire career, or just be complete randos and never do any research on, well, who is this guy? Does he have a past? Has he played with anybody? They'll just like randomly adjudicate in the most horrific way possible. You're just going, wow, you've got this thing in your hand that's like the oracle, and you could find out things that our forefathers would have wished they had access to, and yet you can't even read in the comments to figure the answer to your query. You know what I mean? It's insane.
It's super lame how that stuff works, but you have to just not care.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, you just can't care. And I'm certainly not engaged. I was talking about this with somebody that not too long ago. Is you can never engage with the people online saying this, that, and the next thing, because it's just like, oh yeah, no, I'm not being dragged down that particular alleyway of shame. Alleyway of shame. That's our first song that we're going to work on. Alleyway of Shame.
Could be. But I will say that, if we go back to like the simplicity of stuff, the one thing that is coming out more and more, especially in the videos that you're making, is you are the kind of player that has the vocabulary of the knowledgeable things that sound good in the bluesy, jazzy context, but then you have the quirkiness of your sense of humor in the playing as well. But what I like the most is that it's everything that you're doing is being done with your hands specifically. Like you could be playing through anything, but it's still going to sound like you because the way that you bend and all of the quirky things that are in your playing. So for me, I appreciate that in your style, in the same way that I appreciate that in Jeff Beck's playing
oh, well, thank you very much.
And stuff it takes a lifetime to build that. And I love it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I was talking with my son today, who, as you know, plays drums in the band. And we were just talking about the fact that, I never stop refining, and it's always, and it's not really, it's all those things you were talking. It's like little bends, little, the microtonal things, tone things, that's the reason why, Hendrix to me was my all-time favorite, because just the little, the pick rakes and the little pinchy harmonic things that he would do clean, and just all of that cool nitty-gritty stuff as opposed to, but not to say that I don't appreciate somebody who's got more technical. I was a huge Holsworth fan. I never wanted to, or even had the patience or the ear to sit down and dissect what he was doing, but I loved listening to it, and I loved the chord changes spoke to me. But, Frank had the same effect on me in terms of, I would listen to Live at the Roxy and elsewhere, and I could still, there's one note, and we've talked about this before, and not the torture never stops, but, during that solo on Live at the Roxy and elsewhere, and he bends one note, and it's not quite a whole step down from where it should be, and he bends all the way. It's like that's the greatest note in rock history.
It's so good. I know exactly what you're talking about, and the tone has got such an attitude. It's got a ton of mid range. It's the SG.
Yes,
and the wah happening. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's a bend from nowhere into the note that arrives at the chord change, and it's so good because he starts from the wrong note,
right?
But, it moves. It's not a quick bend,
no.
So it's like you're going for a ride there,
Yes, and that's the kind of stuff I've always gravitated towards, because that to me makes the flavor.
Yeah, well, that is the thing. And, to what we were talking about, when you're doing it and you're doing it with minimal things, like, you don't have to have a pedal board, and you're the kind of player that can just be like, I got my amp, I got my guitar, I'm good to go. Right. I am not comfortable. Well, I don't have a specific style. I'm much more like, I will play different ways depending on the sound that I have in front of me. So I react to the sound and I play based on what the sound is giving me. I can't just play with a neutral sound and feel like I know that I'm going to be able to play whatever I want to play. A sound will dictate what I'm going to be able to go for.
Gotcha. There's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, well, it does. It makes it harder to do things, because it's like, I have, and then it also depends on how well I can interact with the rhythm section.
Right. Exactly. I was going to ask you something before, and I was thinking about it. So much of, the music that was done in the late 60s and 70s, Frank described it, as maybe one of the reasons why is because the record executives with these old men were just kind of, hey, let those kids try whatever they want. And then later on, it was their hip nephew that would take over, who thought they knew what was going on and became the gatekeepers. And and then things just got progressively less cool. But a lot of that music has, as we well know, and I would put Frank in the same echelon. There is a religious, dogmatic worship of these individuals. Frank, I think, deserves it, but of some of these other folks, just because of that music meant more to people back then. It was more of an outlier societal, shift that was so much different from what happened later when everything got a little bit more commercialized and it just didn't have as much gravity and so on and so forth. But I think most people, including myself, grew up with this kind of iconography of these individuals. And I would imagine that you, growing up in Frank's house, didn't have that same approach to some of those more iconic players because your dad was one of them. Your dad knew those people, and you probably didn't have that same. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, I think to the extent that if I like something, I would be interested to learn more about it. And I liked players, and I would, at that time, you could only buy a record and read the liner notes, or maybe buy a magazine that had an interview with somebody. Right. So the connection that you made with the music and the fact that you spent your own money to buy these things and own them.
Right.
The real reason why I think a lot of that music does connect better with people and they have a stronger attachment to it because they spent time with it. It's not like, these days music is just on in the background, and a lot of stuff is just like, my dad described it as really just wallpaper for people's lifestyle. It was something that showed who you were in the background. And, it's almost the same as you see people that effectively just wear a costume so that other people can recognize, oh, you're that type of person. I've been, I know straight away from looking at you that you like these 5 bands and this is the coffee that you're going to order when you go to a Starbucks, and so that kind of thing wasn't a thing back in the day, and so now I think the appreciation of the music and where it came from, there's a lot of that's missing for younger generations. And the tricky part of it is that they don't really care. They don't really want to know more about where it came from. It's just like, here's a good example. Like, this happens over and over, but so Van Halen covered You Really Got Me, but it was written by the Kinks. Right. When I was 12, I heard Van Halen's version of it first. Right. So when I heard the Kinks version, I was like, man, they can't play that Van Halen song for shit.
Right. Sure.
And I didn't appreciate what the difference between the two were. But later I'm like, wait a minute. When the Kinks wrote that song and it came out and the guitar tone that's on there, it's a killer guitar sound. And back then it was, to get people's attention, you had to make something sound different. That guitar sound never existed before. Right. So you heard it and you go, wow, that's cool. Right. But now anybody can just press a button and make a classic sound. And so they don't have an appreciation for actually coming up with the sound to begin with, or the history of why it sounds the way it does and why people like it because of all the years of it being used a certain way. So long story short, I feel like it's this kind of thing happens over and over, where some new generation will hear something where it's been filtered down over and over, and now it becomes the worst version of what we would recognize it as, but it's new to them. So they go, oh, this is cool. Right. It's like, when someone hears Greta Van Fleet, who's, 20 years old, and like, oh, this is the rock band for me. And it's like, have you ever heard Zeppelin? And they're like, who? Right. It doesn't matter. Like, when that stuff happens and it flips in that way, I think it's easy for us who have the knowledge and experience of listening to decades of music. It's easy for us to get frustrated by the lack of wonderment and interest from a younger generation to know more. It's like, wait, you like that version, but this version, the original, is so much better. But for them, it's not, because the song they heard in the moment they heard it, there's in the way that the original did for us.
Right, exactly. I always say it all depends on where you start the clock. It's like, but I think the thing that's I think is different is that when my parents were World War II generation people. My dad was born in 1923. So the music that I got into, they did not understand, and it was an act of rebellion. You know what I mean? It's like they'd hear like, "What is this shit?" I want to hear Stan Kenton. You know what I mean, or whatever. And they didn't get it. Whereas, grandparents now and great grandparents were people that were Frank's age. You know what I mean? And the music is not something that they would, granted, when you talk about different metal things and all kinds of different music that's out now that maybe, us older people would be like, that's shit. But for the most part, the kind of median level stuff that's accepted really hasn't changed that much in like 60 years, which I think is kind of weird.
Well, there's a lot that has been done, so there's less new stuff that can be done.
That's true. Yeah.
And so the thing is, when we're in a place now where a 20-year-old doesn't know who the Beatles are and doesn't care,
right?
That's a line in the sand for a lot of people from our generation that will be like, wait a minute, you are skipping over really good stuff. You should be interested in this. Like, how come this doesn't matter to you? You know, but they just want to hear a 3-note melody with some guy going, yeah,
right.
Yeah. And to them, that's the greatest song that's ever happened. And I don't get it.
Right. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, as I like to say, with my whole approach to everything, it's like, thank God I don't need 1 million people to make a living. I just need enough. So as long as I can find enough people to actually give a shit, we're good.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because I think a lot of people, artists, they get into this thinking, all right, I'm going to make a go at this. And they have this idea that you have to have millions and millions of people that love what you do in order for it to actually be anything. But if you just do a simple numbers game and you look at well, wait a minute, instead of trying to get $1 from 1 million people, and these 1 million people may never come back and may never be interested in you again, what if you were able to cultivate a relationship with 10,000 people that want to spend $100 every year that you're doing something?
Right.
Because you are able to give them something that they want, and you have a reciprocal relationship with them.
Right.
And artists don't like the idea that only 10,000 people or less would be their customers.
Right.
They start to feel like, well, what's the point? But that is the real thing here is, if you're an independent artist, you really need to be able to look at it from a numbers perspective and say, you would be thrilled if you had 10,000 people that were willing to buy $100 worth of merchandise from you on an annual basis.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think the other thing too is that I think, to that same point, people want, I mean, I know when I was younger, I was like, well, someone's going to fucking find me and I'm going to be whisked out of this hell. And then you realize pretty early on, you got to do everything yourself, pal, or you're going to be in trouble. And so nowadays, I mean, I have a lot of people say, well, how doesn't the road get old? I mean, you guys are driving all over the place in that van. I go, listen, it's me, my son, and another guy who we get along with great, who hauls a fucking Hammond B3 with him everywhere we go. We fit in one vehicle. We show up to places where the only reason why people are coming there is to see us play. I set up the merch. I sell the merch before the gig, talk to all the people coming. We play the gig. I go there afterwards. You make acquaintances and friends that will come back for as long as you're willing to go on the road and come back to wherever you're going. And then you're back in your hotel by 10:30. Or 11 o'clock at night, and you drive to the next place and do it all over again. It's like, it's the greatest thing on earth. And then people try to, I was talking with another buddy of mine earlier today as a musician, and, and people give you that, why aren't you better known? I mean, why isn't this place packed? You're just like, listen, if you're under the delusion that life, and particularly the music industry, is a meritocracy, I hate to burst your bubble, but it's really kind of a bullshitocracy. So whatever you can get, and however they come here and however they're digging it, I have no idea, but I'm just grateful they're coming.
That's the thing, is it's a lot of hard work, and people don't know what it really takes to do it, especially when you're in the ranks of being able to do it on a tour bus. The cost of a tour bus.
Yes. It's unbelievable.
People have no idea. Plus, you have to put a down payment on the rental before the tour even starts. So, back in 2020, before the shutdown, it was already expensive. It was like $65,000 a month for a tour bus.
Unbelievable.
Way over 100 now. And you could even get like a shitty bus that's 25 plus years old with all kinds of problems, and you still have to pay that much, because the demand is there and they can make you pay that price.
That's insane.
So, if you have that kind of overhead just for the bus, and then you have a band and a crew and all that stuff, it's very difficult to make it all work. So,
oh my God.
Touring schedule for us, it's oftentimes 6 shows in a row, and then you have a day off, and maybe that day off is a drive day. You might not even have it sitting in a hotel room. And then we don't always have hotels.
Right.
You basically live on the bus and you shower at venues.
Right.
This is not the dream of fancy rock star land. This is very much like, let's just try to make this work. And,
right.
And people show up, we're grateful.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing of the people who really, if you love music and you love playing, you'll do all that stuff to do it, because that's the main thing. If it's about anything involving, I want to become powerful and renowned and all that other kind of shit, it's like you're in for a long, long haul. Or a short one.
Yeah. Then it comes back to the whole thing, like we were talking about with my dad, where people said, "Well, how would you like to be remembered?" And he said, "I wouldn't." So
I wouldn't.
So it's like, if you're doing this because you want to be remembered and you want to be this like amazing thing, a lot of people are going to be like, "Fuck you."
Yeah.
Who cares about what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Who are you?
No doubt about it. Absolutely. Well, listen, my friend, thanks so much for spending some time today. I'd love to chat more. This is fascinating, and I'm definitely up for making some music anytime.
I have a whole setup. I got a studio where we could just make a whole thing. We could bring your guys in. I got some other people we could throw into the mix, but we should just do something and film it while we're doing it, make like a little mini doc about it. And
that sounds fantastic, because that's what I've got in mind for this next thing. Devin and Almond and I have done this collaborative record project where he comes up with half the money, I come up with half the money, and we're just trying to build my thing. And so far it's been really a good relationship, and we're talking about doing kind of an instrumental record next. And I'm kind of just floating around ideas, but that was my main thing. It was be great if we could video it and have the content, because that's going to drive everything. You put that up online and people see what's going on, and the records are always going to buy to a certain extent, but they want to buy the experience, and that promotes the gigs, yada, yada, yada. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, well, we definitely have many avenues to explore, and I think people will probably be interested in some twisted guitar from the two of us.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
And the humor level, I rest assured, will be of a certain level.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and we'll make this little thing happen.
I love it. All right, my friend. Thanks so much. I'm going to turn this off here. Hold on just a second. Well, thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Chewing the Gristle. We certainly do appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you tell your friends all about us. I think they might enjoy themselves. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.